About 4 years ago I made a video comparing 5 different paper fibers to make your own Sculptamold. That video helped a lot of people, but it also missed a few important details. Since then I found a much easier and better method. And I'll also be testing some of your ideas from comments on that video. And I've definitely improved my video making skills since then. So here's an updated version of that video. Let's get started. If you have never used it, Sculptamold is a lightweight modeling compound made from paper fiber and plaster. It's great for building terrain. But in some countries it's hard to find and expensive. That's why in this video I'll show you exactly how to make your own. Here is what you'll need: shredded paper, plaster of Paris, PVA glue and water. In my old video the top method was shredding egg cartons in a blender. But let's be honest, shredding egg cartons in a blender takes forever. And apparently a lot of wives weren't thrilled about the paper pulp in the kitchen blender. So for this video I've retired the kitchen appliances. A much easier option? Just buy cellulose insulation fiber. It's used in buildings to insulate walls and attics, reducing heat loss and blocking sound. And you can get a big bag of this for really cheap. Big thanks to everyone who suggested it in the comments. But let me show you how to make it and what ratios to use depending on what you are doing. So first I add 2 scoops of cellulose insulation fiber and 2 scoops of plaster of Paris. So it's a 50-50 mix. And then I add about 1 teaspoon or 5 milliliters of PVA glue. And then I add 1.5 of the same scoops of water. I mix it in a glass just for the video so you can see it better. For demonstration I've got these 2x2 inch foam bases to apply and test the different mixes on. If you want to increase the working time before it cures, there are a few options. Some people like to add a small amount of vinegar to slow down the curing, but honestly I'm not a fan of that method. I have found that just using cold water is all that's needed, and it doesn't affect the strength of the final product. The water that I used was about 10 degrees Celsius and it took about 15 minutes before I couldn't work with it anymore. 15 minutes is honestly more than enough for plaster. When using warm water you blink and it's already set like concrete. After applying it, I waited 10 minutes and smoothed it out again. It can take a few days for the water to fully evaporate after curing. This was a 50-50 mix of plaster to paper, which I feel offers a nice balance between workability, strength and weight. But if you need to use a lot of it for a big area and you want to keep it as light as possible, then you can mix it with less plaster. I tested 25% plaster and 75% paper and I kept the rest the same. Working with it felt very similar to the 50-50 mix, but it was a bit harder to smooth out. We'll compare the differences once dry, but first I also wanted to test if it's worth adding even more plaster. So I made a mix using 75% plaster and 25% paper. Here's what I found. It was similar to the other mixes, but more gooey and sticky. So I applied it and also left it for like 5 minutes and then came back and smoothed it out even more. And I was able to smooth it out quite nicely. You might be thinking, why add glue? Well, the glue helps it stick more securely to foam and wood. This is without glue and you can see it doesn't want to stick to the surface. And here is with glue added. Plaster alone becomes brittle once dry. The glue can give it some flexibility and make it less likely to chip and crack. I also feel like the glue makes it a smoother texture while applying it. And I've heard that the glue can also slow down the curing process. Before giving my thoughts on the final result and if it's worth adding more plaster, I first want to read a few comments from the old video. Is there any alternative for plaster? I've not tested any other plasters. Plaster of Paris really is perfect for this. Many years ago I tested using only PVA glue with no plaster added, only PVA glue and water, and this is the result. It's as hard as a rock, but it took about 2 weeks to fully dry and it warped like crazy. How do you prevent warping of the styrofoam base? Here's something important. If you use glue or any other plaster that doesn't sit through a chemical reaction, it will probably warp. That's because these materials set by evaporation. The top layer shrinks as the water escapes, pulling the foam upward and warping your base. Plaster of Paris on the other hand sets by a chemical reaction, not just by drying. It hardens evenly without shrinking, which helps to keep the base flat. I saw a video where a gentleman used sawdust. If you think about it, all the products you tried come from wood, and you might try it out too. Oh, I'm gonna try it. Let's do this. I also mix it 50-50 with plaster, so it's 2 scoops each and a teaspoon of PVA glue, just like the rest. For the amount of water, I started by adding 1.5 scoops of water, but after mixing I had to add a bit more water. I think the sawdust absorbed a bit more water compared to the rest. By the way, if you want the recipe and ratios I used for each method, I've posted it in the pinned comment on this video. I don't really know how to describe how it feels to work with. If you're South African, it feels a lot like mixing a bowl of Prenitro cereal. It's a smooth, thick but grainy texture. It works quite well, however if you want to smooth it out for a road or something, I don't think this is the best option. I came back 20 minutes later and tried to smooth it out and make the edges nice. And it was quite nice to work with. But as you can see, I can't really smooth it out a lot. But depending on what you are going for, this might actually be a good thing. I was curious what would happen when using wood shavings like this, aka hamster bedding. Spoiler, it did not go well. I was struggling to think how I could describe the differences, but then I thought sound might give a better idea of the differences in hardness and texture. The wood shavings method just sucked. The sawdust method was alright, nothing special. If you have a lot of sawdust, you can use this method. But otherwise I would just use the cellulose insulation fiber or shredded egg cartons method. They work about the same. I would say the cellulose insulation fiber method is slightly better, and it might also last slightly longer because it's treated with chemicals to prevent mold and stuff. And with the cellulose insulation fiber, you don't have to shred it in a blender, risking getting in trouble with your wife for using the kitchen blender. Something else you need to consider is the weight. Here's the mix with 25% plaster and 75% paper, and compared to the 50-50 mix it's about half the weight and still very durable. So if you are trying to keep it as light as possible, definitely only mix it with 25% plaster. But if you don't really care about weight and want it a bit more durable, then mix it 50-50. And I don't see a reason to add more than 50% plaster. Let me know in the comments if you have another method or something to improve this method for DIY modeling compound. And I'm curious, what are you gonna use it for? For model train layout, a diorama, wargaming terrain, or something else? Please let me know in the comments. By the way, if you want to help me make better videos, please consider buying me a coffee on my Buy Me a Coffee page. But if you can't, no pressure, just watching my videos already helps more than you know. And I hope this video helped you in return. Anyway, thanks for watching, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.